Hello everyone, and welcome to Behind the Bulletin. Today, we're diving into a story that has left fans shocked and deeply emotional. After years of silence, Ahn Eun-jin has finally opened up, breaking down and revealing the truth about Jang Ki-yong. In a way no one expected. What really happened behind the scenes? Did she choose now to speak out? And how will this long-awaited confession change the way fans see their relationship? Stay with us and watch closely, because the truth is finally coming to light, starting right now. The silence spoke louder than any rumor. Whenever the names Ahn Eun-jin and Jang Ki-yong appeared in the same sentence, fans leaned in, waiting for something, anything, that might explain the tension they felt but could never quite define. Interviews were polite. Answers were careful. Smiles appeared on cue. Yet something remained unspoken, hovering just beneath the surface. It became the kind of silence that invites speculation. The kind that grows heavier with time. Behind the cameras, behind the scripted lines and practiced expressions, there was a story that never found its voice. Until now. Those close to Ahn Eun-jin say the change didn't happen overnight. It began quietly, small pauses in interviews. Moments where her gaze drifted away as if pulled by memories she hadn't planned to revisit. When asked about the past, she would deflect with grace, choosing safe words over honest ones. But the strain of holding everything in began to show. Silence, after all, demands endurance. The turning point came unexpectedly. During what was supposed to be a routine conversation, Ahn Eun-jin hesitated. The pause stretched longer than usual. Her voice wavered. Just for a second, but it was enough. Those watching closely could sense it. Something was about to break. When she finally spoke, it wasn't rehearsed. There was no polished narrative. No carefully framed explanation. Instead, there was rawness, an honesty that felt almost fragile. She admitted that staying silent had never been easy. It was a choice made out of caution, respect, and fear of how the truth might be twisted once released into the world. Jang Ki-yong's name, when it left her lips, carried weight. She didn't speak in accusations or dramatic revelations. What shocked fans wasn't scandal, it was vulnerability. She spoke of misunderstandings that lingered too long. Of words that were never said at the right moment. Of how timing can turn even the best intentions into lasting regrets. The atmosphere shifted. What had once been treated as gossip suddenly felt deeply human. For years, people assumed distance meant indifference. Ahn Eun-jin's words dismantled that illusion. Silence, she revealed, was never emptiness. It was restraint. It was a way of protecting not just herself, but someone else too. As her voice faltered, the room grew still. There were no interruptions. No one dared to rush the moment. This wasn't a headline being manufactured, it was a truth finally surfacing after years spent buried under expectation and restraint. And once the silence cracked, there was no going back. The impact was immediate and explosive. Hours, reactions flooded in from every corner of the internet. Fans replayed her words repeatedly, analyzing every pause, every breath, every emotion that slipped through despite her effort to remain composed. What stunned people most wasn't what she revealed. How deeply it contradicted the narratives they had built over the years. Ahn Eun-jin didn't present herself as a victim. Did she frame Jang Ki-yong as one? Instead, she spoke about two people navigating pressure, misunderstanding, and emotional restraint in an industry that rarely allows space for honesty. Her breakdown wasn't dramatic, it was quiet, restrained, and devastating in its sincerity. She admitted that carrying unspoken feelings had changed her. It influenced her choices, her performances, even how she approached relationships afterward. Silence, she said, has a cost. And for years, paid it privately. What followed was something few expected: empathy. Fans who once demanded answers now found themselves questioning their own expectations. Many realized that the truth they wanted so badly came at a personal price. Others expressed regret, admitting that their speculation may have contributed to the very silence they criticized. Jang Ki-yong remained silent. And somehow, this time, the silence felt different. It no longer seemed evasive, it felt respectful. Almost intentional. In Ahn Eun-jin's honesty, there was no demand for response. Invitation to reopen wounds. Just closure. Industry insiders described the moment as rare. In a world driven by image and control, Ahn Eun-jin chose uncertainty instead. She allowed herself to be seen not as a character, not as a symbol, but as a person shaped by unresolved emotions and the weight of time. The aftermath wasn't chaos, it was reflection. People began revisiting old footage, old interviews, noticing details they had once overlooked. It's held too long. A smile that faded too quickly. Suddenly. Past felt different. Reframed by a truth that had waited years to be told. Ahn Eun-jin didn't say everything. Perhaps that's what made her words so powerful. Cared enough to be honest. But not so much that it became spectacle. The truth she told wasn't meant to shock, it was meant to breathe. And in doing so, she changed the conversation. This wasn't about scandal. It was about what happens when silence becomes heavier than truth. And someone finally decides to put it down. Fans may have been stunned. But what they witnessed was something far more lasting than surprise. They witnessed release. After years of silence. The truth didn't explode, it unfolded. Quietly. Painfully. Honestly. And sometimes, that kind of truth is the most shocking of all. What followed was not the kind of ending people were accustomed to. There was no press conference. No official clarification. No neatly packaged conclusion that tied every loose end together. Instead, there was a slow, uncomfortable settling, like dust after a long-delayed collapse. In the days after Ahn Eun-jin spoke, the industry seemed to hold its breath. Conversations grew quieter. Interviews became more cautious. First time in years. People weren't rushing to fill the silence. They were listening to it. Those close to Ahn Eun-jin noticed a change almost immediately. She appeared lighter, yet strangely exposed. As if shedding the weight of silence had also stripped away a layer of protection. She smiled less deliberately now. Her pauses were no longer guarded but reflective. The truth, once released, had altered her posture toward the world. She admitted that speaking out had terrified her. Not because of backlash, but because honesty leaves no room to hide. For years, silence had been her armor. It meant standing unshielded before public interpretation, misinterpretation, and judgment. Still, she said she would make the same choice again. Carrying the truth alone had become more painful than sharing it. Jang Ki-yong's absence from the conversation continued. And yet his presence was everywhere. Fans debated his silence endlessly. But gradually the tone shifted. Instead of demanding answers, many began to understand restraint. Jin had not asked for his response. She had not framed her truth as an invitation to reopen the past. In that restraint, people sensed a quiet agreement, an understanding that some stories do not need two voices to be real. As time passed, the shock softened into something deeper. Viewers revisited Ahn Eun-jin's performances with new eyes. Scenes that once felt purely fictional now carried echoes of lived emotion. Lines delivered with restraint. Glances filled with hesitation. Suddenly, her work felt layered with experiences no script could have written. Critics began to write differently about her. Not as an actress defined by her roles, but as one shaped by emotional endurance. They spoke of her performances as grounded, restrained, painfully honest. First time, the word brave appeared not as a compliment, but as an observation. What Ahn Eun-jin revealed did not rewrite the past. It reframed it. Years of silence no longer looked empty, but full of choices, restrained. Emotional discipline that few ever acknowledged. Silence, she had shown, can be loud when understood properly. The public moved on, as it always does. New stories emerged. Headlines replaced old ones. But something subtle remained altered. Expectations shifted. Fans became quieter, more careful, more aware that curiosity has consequences. Ahn Eun-jin continued forward, not defined by what she said, but by the fact that she finally allowed herself to say it. The truth did not give her closure in the way people imagine closure should look. There was no relief without residue. Peace without scars. But there was honesty. And sometimes, it is not an ending, it is a beginning that comes far later than expected. Years of silence had shaped her. Breaking it reshaped everyone else. And in that quiet aftermath, one thing became clear: the most powerful stories are not the ones shouted from the beginning, but the ones that survive years of being held inside. Waiting for the moment they can finally be told. As this story comes to a close, what remains is not shock, nor rumor, nor unanswered curiosity, but understanding. Jin's decision to finally speak was never about rewriting the past or changing public opinion. It was about reclaiming her own voice after years of choosing silence over exposure, restraint over release. What she shared was not dramatic for the sake of attention. It was powerful because it was restrained, because it carried the weight of time, and because it reminded everyone that behind every public figure is a human being navigating emotions the world rarely sees. Her honesty didn't demand agreement or sympathy, it simply asked to be heard. The story of Ahn Eun-jin and Jang Ki-yong may never have a perfectly defined ending. And perhaps that is the point. Truths are not meant to be concluded neatly. They exist to be acknowledged, respected, and then carried forward with greater awareness. If there is one lasting impact of her words, it is this: silence is not absence, and speaking out is not weakness. Sometimes, it is the bravest form of closure a person can choose. Thank you for taking the time to stay with this story until the very end. Thank you for listening carefully, thinking thoughtfully, and allowing space for nuance in a world that often rushes to judgment. We hope this story offered not just insight, but reflection. And we look forward to sharing more stories with you, stories that go beyond headlines and into the human truths behind them. Thank you for being here.